Welcome. Dawson County Board of Commissioners work session. Today's Thursday, August the 1st. Appreciate your attendance. We'll get right into the new business. First up, we have presentation of proposed fire prevention protection ordinance and fee schedule. Emergency Services Director Danny Thompson. Danny.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, good evening to you guys. I'll start by saying I want to take an opportunity to thank Mr. McKee, Jameson, also the county attorney staff. A lot of man hours have went into this project over the last year since I have taken over. And again, you know, this ordinance crosses a lot of different departments, and we had to make sure that what we presented to you all was going to cover us from a fire ordinance standpoint and everything. And there's a lot of effort that went into this project. So I kind of want to digress back. In 2005, Dawson County adopted an ordinance titled then the Dawson County Fire and Safety Prevention Ordinance, also commonly referred to as the Dawson County Fire Ordinance. This ordinance was incorporated into Chapter 22 of the Dawson County Code of Ordinances. Its intended purpose was to address the fire safety and prevention concerns in a manner more tailored to our local environment. This ordinance established the minimum requirements for construction plan review of fire protection systems, and the issuance of permits. The ordinance also addressed performing inspections at various stages for the commercial building construction, whether it be new buildings, annual inspections of existing buildings, and the issuance of certificates of occupancy. Lastly, the ordinance contained then a fee schedule for the above services. In 2006, the Dawson County Board of Commission adopted the then Georgia State Minimum Fire Codes as their fire code. In doing so, unfortunately, much of Dawson County's fire code was expressly repealed by that adoption. So therefore, we have fast forwarded and we have presented to you all a new document to be able to codify both the Georgia State Fire Code, the International Building Code, the International Fire Code, and along with our local ordinance now. These changes will reflect in Chapter 22. Just kind of a highlight of some of the overall significant changes, and there were a lot of language changes that is in the document that I won't cover just due to time, but I just wanted to kind of highlight some of those. Section 22-4 states the fire department access roadways shall be built to current Dawson County construction standards, which allow for wider curb-to-curb widths, larger diameter cul-de-sacs, diameters more so than the state minimum. It also stipulates that all motorized security gates shall be required to be equipped with a Knox key switch. When I took over, I was turned over a list of probably 200-300 various codes, keys to gates around the county. And this is as we've grown from a smaller community to where we're at today. It's really just not conducive for us in the emergency response business to maintain that database. And if somebody sold the property, they didn't update it, and they changed it, then we were locked out, and we were forced to have to force entry. Section 22-6 establishes the definitions and a schedule of fines for reoccurring nuisance false alarms. We do have a lot of commercial businesses and residential where we have repeat alarms, and in that, the fines are assessed at $100, $250, and then increases to $1,000. I think it's also something to mention there, that's typically after the third alarm, and you'll see that inside of the actual ordinance package you have. Section 22-22 increases the distance from lot line setbacks. We went from 15 to 25 feet, requiring fire-resistive, rated or non-combustible walls. Also stipulates that vinyl siding may be approved with a 1 hour rated sheathing underneath the siding. There's also guidelines in there to be able to potentially grant variances as they do come up. Section 22-23 addresses the requirement of a fully sprinklered building to include all attic spaces and breezeways of multifamily buildings where fire sprinkler systems are required. We currently have several multifamily dwellings inside of Dawson County where the attics are non-sprinkler, and those pose significant challenges for us when we have those lightning strikes, because as you all are very aware, we don't have a ladder truck in this county currently, so we have the ability to reach to 2 stories, and that is it. We also, in section 22-24, we clarified that Dawson County will be entitled to charge fees for services such as plan reviews, inspections, permits, and not to exceed the fees authorized by the state. So I'll stop there by mentioning you all have already adopted the Georgia State Minimum Fire Code. In that, there is a fee schedule inside of the state fire code. So you will not see that when we start talking about fees as part of a resolution down the road, because those numbers we can't change because of the understanding and the agreement that we have with the State Fire Marshal's Office and the Georgia State Fire Codes. So I do have the ability to share with you all that document as needed also. Section 22-25 reduces the minimum spacing of fire hydrants in residential areas from 600 feet to 500 feet and increases the area required to be kept clear of unobstructions around the fire hydrants from 3 feet to 5 feet. Section 22-26 establishes the minimum fire flow requirements for new construction, a minimum of 1,000 GPMs for a residential and a minimum of 1,500 GPMs for any commercial buildings. Larger buildings may require higher fire flows and will be addressed during the plan review phase of said documents. Section 22-27 provides for the issuance of a stop work order in the event unpermitted or construction other than what has been permitted based on approved plans as found in the field. Since coming on board as your fire chief, I have had the unfortunate privilege of having to issue quite a few of these because we still have individuals in this county that will have attempted to build commercial buildings without pulling the necessary permits, and therefore we have issued said stop work orders to bring these individuals into compliance. And that's really the bottom line of that one. Section 22-24 stipulates that non-commercial outdoor burning of vegetative matter shall require a valid permit from the Georgia Forestry Commission, be attended at all times by a person 18 years or older with the ability to extinguish the fire, and shall be conducted during the hours of 1 hour after sunrise and out by no later than 1 hour before sunset. We didn't want to, the original ordinance had a time from 9 to 5, and we know as we transition from one daylight savings to another, you lose that time. So we wanted to just assign basically 1 hour after sunrise, 1 hour before sunset. I think it's something also to mention, I provided in the packet a fee schedule for you all to look at, ask any questions that you may have. It will be done as a resolution, and the sole purpose of that is because we want to have an ordinance, and this ordinance that we have before you all, we feel that we'll protect our liabilities for a good 10 to 15 years probably before we have to come back, potentially look at making changes, and another board and another fire chief here before you presenting that and making those necessary changes. But what we want to do is have a resolution of the fee side of it. That way, if we decide to change the fees, we just come back on a resolution. We don't have to change the whole ordinance. It's just a little bit better business sense for us. Makes it a little bit easier on you guys for that, and that's really what we're trying to do. So at that point, I will take any questions that you may have.
Questions for Danny?
Does the city follow these same changes, or are you able to apply these same restrictions or changes?
So once it goes to public hearing, obviously there'll have to be a public hearing on this. Then we will coordinate with the city also.
They will go through a public hearing as well and process and have the decision to adopt this or not adopt this.
Correct.
Are they currently in line with what we're following?
Sometimes.
Okay. The fees that you presented, are they in line with our neighbors to them around us?
Yeah, most of the fees, and again, I'll pass that up, I'm not sure, and I apologize. I'm gonna show you the state document. These fees are set by the agreement, and then, the next one, like I said, we have, this will be a front and back. These are set by, the OCGA 25-2-4. So when we adopted the state minimum fire codes, these we can't change till the state changes. State changes, we can change
Right.
with them. But everything else, we're pretty well in line. Some things we try to keep it reasonable, and everything, but, really most of ours revolve around CPR. We do a lot of CPR stuff out there. We have a lot of medical offices, that request healthcare provider CPR, daycares and that stuff. So really, those are where we had a lot of the fee changes in that document.
Yeah.
But I would say we're pretty close to everybody. Yes.
Other questions?
Chief, one thing I noticed on the fire flows, they reference the appendix, the tables. I guess it's for the attorney and because on the state, we adopt the minimum codes, we adopt the codes, we don't adopt the appendix. So is this ordinance, are we adopting the appendix?
We did adopt a few of the appendix in this, so obviously you
So we're not adopting all the appendix, we're adopting some appendix.
some, correct. And that's why we codified them in the ordinance. Does that answer?
A lot of appendix we can't apply.
Correct. You're right. And I think really the appendix that we added in there was Appendix D.
Yeah,
and-
Fire flows.
Yeah, and another one. Yes, sir, Commissioner.
Other questions?
Do we need to send this to DCA?
No, we do not.
Okay.
No, it's simply a local process for approval.
We'll have to have a public hearing though,
That's correct.
one or two.
I believe it's two readings in a public hearing, so I think typically you advertise that for two.
Is there a proactive communication approach that we have a plan that we're gonna implement in order to get this disseminated out to the public other than through our, I mean, is that something that PR office is working on? If there's some burning changes, somebody might be used to burning until 9 o'clock every night and then this hit, you don't wanna hit somebody with this without really doing a good job of communicating it.
Well, and Commissioner, you bring up a good valid point. We try to work with everybody.
Yeah.
Whether it's a resident, we go to illegal burns quite often, and we never issue a fine. We take that as a learning opportunity. It's those repeat offenders that we try to, really have the fines. And I think that's something else to remember. And a lot of times in this, you have fees for services, which will be part of the resolution. And in the new ordinance, you have fines. So in the event that we do issue a citation, when they go to magistrate court, there's a fine schedule that's outlined for those judges to be able to apply that. And it helps them on the judicial side and everything. But again, we really want to try to be good stewards and work with everybody that we possibly can, and not have to use fines and stuff of that nature. But sometimes it takes a fine to get through to some people.
Get their attention.
It does. As I say, it does.
Well, the fine schedule is required for the master court to be able to do anything anyway.
Yeah.
You can have all the ordinances if you want, but there ain't no penalty phase to them, they're useless.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we kept everything on the fine side. Really, we mirrored that. It's, 100 to 250 and then 1,000. Because remember, oftentimes we're talking about, this is going to be that third, fourth, fifth offense that you're talking.
Other questions?
I would just, to piggyback on that from a PR standpoint, let's try to make sure that we're putting something out there, communicating wise, very overabundantly with the community, that we made a few tweaks or something somehow.
Okay. And there's always a period of transition,
Yeah.
you just can't, and really, sometimes when people tell you they didn't know, they really didn't know.
That's right.
You kind of can distinguish those people, but you know, they can kind of give people a chance to, before you hit them in the pocketbooks.
We'll have to provide good common sense practice.
Absolutely, that's
That's
it.
been the practice we've used for years.
Have
We
you?
don't go out and find somebody the first time we catch them burned illegally.
Correct.
Go out and tell them, don't do that, because our fine is minimal compared to what the EPD would do to them.
Or big canoe.
You're looking at it. Used to, if I got people who would give me any lip service, I'd say, well, okay, I'll just turn you into EPD, and they'll fine you $10,000.
Mhm.
And I said, well, let me get my hose. I'll put it out.
The chairman makes a very, very good point. We really don't want to be in the business of issuing citations to illegal burners because EPA and the DNR, they have hefty fines that typically start at $5,000. Yeah,
They don't play.
they don't play.
They don't.
They don't play one
So
bit.
there's layers of fines then.
Yes, ma'am. And they'll stack a charge for every little piece that's in a burn pipe.
You cannot burn anything man-made,
Yeah.
period.
Got any questions?
Don't burn a piece of paper.
Got any questions, just give me a call real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Save you a little bit on your wallet.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Next up,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
next up, we have a presentation of State Route 136, the Toto Creek Bridge Replacement Detour Request. Public Works Director David McKee. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Worked with DOT for quite some time now on this particular project, and a number of different projects. As it relates to this project, DOT is proposing to replace a bridge that goes over Toto Creek, essentially that section of Lake Lanier there, just to the north, I guess you will, of Henry Grady Highway. They have assessed multiple different detour routes. The most practical detour route is to utilize the off-system road, or county-maintained road of Henry Grady Highway. If you'll recall, a year and a half or so ago, we did the same thing for Keith Evans Road for the Cochran Creek Bridge replacement. What this does is it allows DOT to get those bridges replaced much quicker. And the reality is that folks are going to use this road as a detour anyway. And by classifying Henry Grady, at least then we can publish, DOT can publish the route, and if there's any deficiencies in the road when it is done, then we'll go back out, myself and DOT will go back out and re-inspect that road, and then DOT will give us funds to repair it. What I can tell you is that we have already conducted the initial inspection. We did repave the road, rehabilitate the road with some LBIG funds last year. Yes, last year. So the road is in inadequate shape. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that I have had a lot of communication with several representatives from Chestatee Homeowner Association. They did have some reserve as to this detour route, and that folks would go down Dogwood and Nightfire and use Chestatee. Dogwood and Nightfire are county roads, and that is a possibility. DOT has committed to signs attempting to keep people from doing that. My response is there is a stop sign, there is a left-handed turn, and there's a second stop sign going through that residential environment there. So again, reality is it's not likely that the traveling public would do that. They'll go down to Henry Grady, turn right. There is no stop sign, it's a straight shot to 400. So that discussion did come up. What I'm asking for is asking for the board's authorization for DOT to utilize Henry Grady Highway as the primary detour route, published detour route. The map that you had shows the different variations in the detour routes that they would have to utilize should they use state routes. It's approximately a 20-mile detour. It's up 60 all the way towards the end of 400, 400 back down to the south. So it's a 20-mile detour versus 3/4 of a mile. And I'll attempt to answer any questions. I guess it's also as it relates to the Chestatee Homeowner Association. A couple of the commissioners might have been copied on some email correspondence back and forth from Russell McMurray, the GDOT commissioner, and there is simply stating it that the funds don't allow to do anything other than close this bridge and create the detour. And that's DOT stance.
Questions for David?
Is there, and this is just a hypothetical question, question. Can we put in some temporary speed bumps on Night Fire that would further mitigate people wanting to drive through there? I mean, that's just.
Can we? Yes. The problem is as we all sit here, they won't become temporary. They'll become a maintenance nightmare from now on.
You can't do the plastic nail down ones.
We could. They cause more damage than good. People go faster over them, and now we're causing damage to vehicles. And so, to answer your question, though, yes, we absolutely could. I believe we can accomplish. I believe we can accomplish with some signage at first. And then again, I've committed to DOT, to Chesapeake, as has DOT, that we'll do everything we can to stop that and publish it and keep that information open.
Well, they're gonna put probably one of the biggest concerns is trucks, because they can't make that turn when they're back on Night Fire. Probably another 3 truck or something on, but you're still not gonna stop the construction trucks, but at least stop the big trucks.
Right.
And I guess the next question, Jameson might know this too, on the boat storage. Because in your grade is pretty tight, especially if the boats are parked all out the road. Are we keeping up on that, as far as keeping those boats off the right of way?
Henry Grady has 2 11.5-foot travel lanes with about an 18-inch shoulder, so the roadway itself is adequate. I mean, it'll handle any
Unless
traffic.
those boats are parked out there.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't be parked in the road. If they're in the road, yes, we have a couple times had to address that. Yes.
Can we restrict them parking that stuff in the right of way?
I think I put signs up there.
We've got signs, and
Okay.
we've issued citations,
So
and
they'll park in between the signs.
they do, or move them.
Or move the signs.
And the state might do this already, like GPS databases. So if somebody were we live and breathe, and we had this conversation the other day about if I want to go XYZ, I punch it in my phone and it takes me that route. Will GDOTs, do they interact with GPS databases in order to highlight that there's a alternative route?
They attempt to. Most of those, as you know, are private services.
Yeah.
So they don't control them, although they do attempt to reach out to them. Certainly, trucking routes and logistics companies, yes, are given that information. I'm not going to stand before you and tell you that they all will be changed, no.
Yeah.
But they do make an attempt to do that.
The timeline on this thing is what, 18 months?
Yeah, I put 8 to 12 months
8 to
closure.
12,
The scheduled start time is fall of 2021, is when the scheduled start time of the closure.
Are they gonna do both the bridges at the same time?
There's a possibility that the projects will overlap. Your question is the one over the Chesapeake River? Yes.
Well, one is-
There's a possibility they will overlap. However, the Chesapeake River is not going to be a closure.
gonna be
It'll be a
one.
side-by-side construction, similar to what you saw on 53 over in Chesapeake and Forsyth Hall County line.
That may be on 9 South, right?
It's 9 South was controlled with a signal and a single lane. As I understand this one, they've actually acquired enough right away, and it's going to be separate side-by-side construction.
Other questions for David?
Could we have an update on Red Rider Road? How did that go with them making it into one entrance?
It went.
It got done.
Anytime you make vastly different traffic improvements, they're not broadly accepted by everybody.
Well,
So-
nobody's calling me.
Yeah, we did make that changeover this week, and we saw people still going both directions. So it will take some time, as you know, to get to that point and then realize. And so we have communicated with everybody as such, and seems to be going fine today. So.
You'll be getting calls since you mentioned it.
Probably.
Other questions? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Next up, a presentation of updated transit, drug, and alcohol testing policies. Senior Services Director Dawn Pruitt. Dawn.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm here on 2 things on the agenda. The first is the request for approval of the updated transit, drug, and alcohol testing policy. So this is a separate policy that we have from our HR policy. Some things are a little bit stringent, and also this one includes, we do a back testing around breath alcohol testing. on it if they're in an accident or, post-accident, pre-accident, or whatever. We have a little bit different regulations, DOT. All the people that are under our testing policy, which includes myself, even though I don't drive a bus because I'm the director, all of the drivers, all of our substitute drivers, as well as Shannon and Scott at Fleet, because they work on our buses. So all of us are in that testing pool, as well as the testing pool for HR, so we have to stay extra clean. That's what I tell everybody. So we're good to go. So we just have to update every couple of years when they make changes to, FTA makes changes, so these are included in those changes.
Anything drastic?
No, I think the big thing was they added, they made some references to one of the, drugs that we've added to.
The Lord, something started with a P, I've never heard of it. Can't
I'm trying to
remember.
think, there's a new drug out there that falls into the system that they renamed a couple of years ago. Or, yeah, if, Lisa's here, she might remember that.
So that's just,
No clue.
but that, they just added, okay, here's the
What page?
P-H-E-N.
You don't.
Is it fentanyl?
No,
No,
P-H-E-N-C-Y,
what page is that on?
32, well, this says page 5, mine's 32, but it's got page 5, maybe.
Is there a pharmacist
It says under prohibited
Phenocybin,
drug.
yeah.
I never,
I don't even need to try to pronounce that. Phencyclidine.
Yeah,
Phencyclidine.
okay.
That's
Is
probably
that the one that was added?
Probably. Mhm.
I didn't know what clue it was.
And I think that's pretty much, we have kept the same, breath alcohol, the same, substance abuse professional as far as medical review officer. So that's something different that we have from our HR policy as well. We do a split specimen. That's how that split specimen. So, one gets, tested there, one gets tested through their facility, and then there's a holding pattern for that second one. So if it was to come back positive or whatever, then we would send the next one back and double check it.
Just as me.
Is this mostly state,
Federal.
federal?
FTA.
This is federal?
It's DOT, but it all goes under FTA guidelines.
This is one of them deals that they tie, what they want you to
With the
do with the
grant.
money.
Yeah, with a grant, you have to do, to get the grant.
Either you do or you don't.
Which we would want anyway.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions for Dawn? All right, Dawn, you got the next one, presentation of Title VI plan for transit.
This is our Title VI plan, and it's usually good for every 2 or 3 years. We had some minor changes to this, and this has to do with language and language assistant, language barriers that we have. We're required to post things on our buses that if we need help with, different languages there. So, and we're like, you know, there's only a small percentage that is not English proficient.
Now, where did those statistics come from? I
The
think I asked
census.
you this every time.
The census,
The census.
the last census, so this next census in 2020, there'll be a lot of changes due to
Okay.
it. And as you can see in the package, it has the I Speak flashcards and different things that we'll carry on the bus and we'll point to. And then there's a number that we call if we have any of that, but if you look at the numbers in there, we're very, very small percentages.
Oh, yeah.
And we just have to have also, you know, a complaint form in Spanish in case we ever were to have any complaints and any.
Have you ever had a complaint?
Just very small things, nothing major, no lawsuits.
Oh,
As
okay.
far as Title VI, you know, we've not, on Title VI, no lawsuits, no investigation, and no complaints on Title VI.
Yes, that's what it is.
Yep.
Questions for Dawn? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have a presentation of proposed county vape shop ordinance, Planning and Development Director James McKinney. James?
Mr. Chairman, there are chemicals in this ordinance that I don't know how to pronounce.
Oh, I'll know one, just ask.
under the direction of the planning department with the opinions of yourselves and the attorneys, we created this vaping ordinance that's before you today. This is really less of an ordinance and really more of an amendment to our business license ordinance, our park and rec ordinance, and adds language to our offenses and miscellaneous provisions. This document or amendments provides 3 different factors. 1, the licensing of vape shops. 2, imposes restrictions on operations of vape shops. And 3, restricts the use of vapor products and alternative nicotine products around schools and churches. Exhibit A before you is an amendment to our business license ordinance. With the addition of a business license, the applicant must submit a separate application in order to operate a specialty vape shop. The applicant will have to show the store is 300 feet from a church and 600 feet from a school. He or she must be 21 years of age and have no previous violations of this ordinance or any felonies. The shop itself cannot sell to anyone under the age of 21. It has to post signs stating that the only chemicals they're allowed to sell, as well as explaining how to safely operate e-batteries. This ordinance also prohibits the mixing of the vape juices on premises. Exhibit B is under the offenses and miscellaneous provisions ordinance. These other ordinances in this provision are like the noise ordinance, ATV usage, other things like that. This portion restricts the purchase and possession to those only over the age of 21. It restricts usage within 300 feet of a church and 600 feet of a school, and the use of how it's used at the vape shop, so they can't actually use inside the vape shop unless they have special provisions accordingly. Exhibit 3 is basically for our Parks and Recreation ordinance. It replaces the language that says no person shall be using electronic cigarettes or vape products on the property owned, leased, or operated by Dawson County. And it replaces that with the verbiage that says no person shall use any alternative nicotine product or vapor product, including e-cigarettes, on property owned, leased, or operated by Dawson County. I'll close the door for questions.
Questions for Jameson?
And this is maybe just a zoomed out comment more than a question, but, you know, a lot of times we put ordinances in place, it seems like for the sake of putting ordinances in place, and we don't think through, or maybe thought is put into it, but the actual implementation of how do we monitor this stuff, and how do we even come in and enforce some of these things. You know, again, sometimes it feels like we put ordinances in place for the sake of putting ordinances in place, and I don't necessarily agree with that from a philosophical standpoint, if we're not going to enforce these things. So has there been a buy-in from the sheriff's office? Have they been involved in this, and are they committed to looking at some of these things and coming up with a plan to try? And that might not be a question you can answer, but
what I can tell you is that we looked at it. What was originally presented to us was the ordinance that went before the city, and the city voted in. And we took this and we looked at it, and I believe we passed along to the sheriff as well, and stated, listen, this is something that we need to be able to enforce. This is something that I need, you know, my marshal officer to be able to walk into the store and visually see these signs and have to and to know where these things. We can't add a whole lot of language in there that gives loopholes or anything else. It needs to be something that is easily enforced, and I believe that the document before you is a good compromise on that.
Did the city mimic, and this might be a good question, did the city, I know Forsyth County had some issues with theirs, I believe, didn't they, when they implemented it, and do we have any of that language that's gonna go down that same rabbit hole?
You know, I don't remember exactly what that language was, Chris, I can look at that. You know, in terms of what the city did, I think that's what prompted all of this, and I think they jumped in because Forsyth had done something.
Right.
So I believe those issues have been corrected, or those challenges that were brought are not gonna be applicable here, but I'll review that and confirm that for everyone as we proceed with any public hearing. Just for everyone's information, that we did start this, as Jameson mentioned, with looking at the city of Dawsonville's ordinance. What the staff has worked through and we've assisted them with is significantly different in some respects. So I just want to make sure you understand that. We've provided that to you. I think you've seen both versions. I think the substantive difference that's probably the most glaring is the fact of just how we're regulating. And that is that the city of Dawsonville is approaching this very much like an alcohol license, where they're doing heightened background checks and pursuing this as a separate freestanding license. And then Jameson and his staff wanted to pursue it a little differently, where it is a modification of the business license ordinance, and it's an element of the business license process. So they go through the same regulations of a business license, but not some of the heightened background checks. And so those are two differences I just wanted to make sure you were aware of. Another difference, I think, that just to make sure you're aware of, is that the Dawsonville ordinance goes a little further in terms of regulating generally all, I think they call it alternative nicotine products, which includes some various things that I'm not sure I know how to pronounce or what they are. Hookah pipes, I don't know if anybody know?
Yeah.
I don't know what they
Hookah
are.
pipe, it's not a hookah pipe.
What's it called?
Hookah.
Hookah.
You see, I thought it was
Such a good sweet girl, I don't know.
And the only reason why I know is I watched the Discovery Channel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's his story. Just stick it to it. Yeah.
So I specialize.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I mean, that question was coming the minute that came out of my mouth.
At any rate, we are limiting, in the ordinance that we have proposed for the county side, is strictly the vaping product. So that's something for you to consider, and that's part of the work session, is for us to put this out here and talk about how far do you want to go, how you want to handle it. But that's something that I wanted you to realize was different in the city ordinance that you may want to consider. Both of the ordinance bans these specialty vape shops, and a specialty vape shop is defined as a shop with more than 25% of sales from vaping products. So you see these are popping up where they're strictly a vaping store, and so both ordinances ban those. But I've understood from Jameson that there's 4 existing specialty shops already in the Dawson County, which may be surprising to you. So those are going to be grandfathered. So just be mindful of that we can put this change in place, and they're going to continue to exist.
That's what I had a question on. I mean, and I think I asked that in one of the emails. If they go out of business or lose their business because of a violation, can we not grant another person from opening back up in that store, or open that store back up?
Right, well,
And
that's
close
what
it, not issue another license?
right. Well, what's going to happen there is going to apply our grandfather provisions that are in our zoning ordinance. But presumably, no, that they would not be entitled if they violated law and broken there. So I would want to look for sure at what our
But in the
proposals
past, over the years, we've closed the store, say for alcohol or something, and then they bring a relative in or somebody else and applies for a license, and they open right back up. Can we not keep that store from opening back up?
Yeah, well, now in that situation, there's probably not a zoning problem or an ordinance problem, it's just a violation issue.
Right.
So I think that's entirely appropriate. I will say grandfather does run with the land, but this is a license. And so a license is unique and different than a land use. Licenses do not run with the land, and they can be lost.
Okay.
And so that's an important piece of it.
And a license is an annual renewal license.
That's right.
So annually it has to be.
Annually, they have to, exactly.
I guess the other question, Chairman, on enforcement, I know in the past, some ordinances, we've stated who could enforce it. For example, if they can't use it at the park, and we don't have a code enforcement or law enforcement, can park personnel tell them they can't use it? Because somebody's gonna ask, well, who are you to tell me I can't use it?
Yes.
So if
Well, that's a good question, and I think we probably need to address that more clearly. I mean, to my understanding, when you say park personnel, you just mean one of our parks employees.
yeah, staff, if
Yeah.
they see somebody back there vaping, and, because the way they're mixing that stuff now, I mean, you don't know what's in it.
That's right. Well, I mean, I think it's presumed that code enforcement or marshal, right, would enforce. Now, whether someone says, just like if any of you saw someone doing something they shouldn't do in the assembly hall, you might say, you're not supposed to be doing that. That doesn't mean you can issue them a citation and take them to court on that. So I think to your point, no, the parks employees would not be able to be an enforcement arm, and I wouldn't propose that we do that, but they can
No.
certainly put them on notice and say that's not permitted. Just like, you know, you're not supposed to chew bubble gum on the field, whatever, you know, they can tell them the rules. But I think they would then need to call someone from the marshal's office to actually issue the official warning notice and proceed with any enforcement.
But that'll work on weekends, that's the fact.
Code.
Code enforcement doesn't work on weekends.
Right, that's.
There's your loophole.
There's a loophole,
Yeah.
and that's really not just, like I said, we enable, you know, different departments to enforce ordinances or codes in the past, where it be the, even though they weren't law enforcement or mandated, they still could enforce the code.
Well, and, you know, it's not a type of thing that, there's gonna be an arrest.
No.
And so, I mean, that's something we could consider, this could be authorized, I mean, if that's a concern. Does the sheriff's office cooperate with, enforcement of any of our ordinances? Like after hours and weekends?
Well, I don't know, I can't remember.
Probably would if they were called, I imagine, to come down there.
That just depends.
But in the law part of that, wouldn't there have to be somebody that's mandated to bring that kind of a case anyway?
Yeah, I would be concerned that, that it needs to be someone who is authorized legally to enforce ordinances, and typically that's just not an annual employee.
Are yours
So-
mandated?
Well, they're not gonna be like post-certified
We're not.
mandated.
Right.
But,
We can also, we can issue citations, all of our citations go before the magistrate judge.
Mhm. So let's look at that, because I think that's a valid point. Probably many of these violations would occur on the weekends, and if we don't have code enforcement, I didn't realize that, if we don't have enforcement on the weekends, then that's something we should.
I would
consider.
believe it would be any situation that, for any, you know, Parks and Rec, that as they're hosting events, if there's any violation of the rules and they need to, they would call the sheriff's office too, and they would dispatch. It would just be something else that they could, write a ticket for.
And I think that would also go back to if Matt, for example, came up to me and I was vaping or whatever you call it, and he asked me to stop, and then I decided I was going to be on the other end of that and not follow his direction, then obviously that's when he would call law enforcement. But for the most part, we would hope that most people would say, oh, I didn't know that, and stop or go get in their car and drive on. Same thing that we have, like Danny was talking about before, where you go out to a burn violation, tell them that you can't do that, you're in violation, they usually grab their hose and put it out. And so you would hope that would be the same thing here, but if you ran across the one or two that decided they wanted to buck you, obviously you're not gonna put yourself in any jeopardy, that's when you would call law enforcement, or your office if you were open.
And I assume we already have no smoking regulations or whatnot at the park, so, I mean, we're already handling it in one way, shape, or form already. We're adding just another line item to
Another layer.
Well, that's a good point, and they could certainly be asked to leave, be asked to
Yeah.
stop, it's a matter of the person that writes them a ticket.
Right.
But, you know, typically I think there's a warning process.
Don't they have areas they can smoke? They go beyond the fence?
I would have to check on that, and I'd be irresponsible, I said I do 100%, I'd have to check on that. but I
I've
think
seen
it's-
smoking down there, I'm just,
I
that's
think
bad.
I think our current ordinance doesn't allow smoking on any county property.
I think you're right, Mr. Chairman, I believe that's the.
I believe.
does this, and you might have said it, and I might have just not heard you. I mean, do we regulate now smoking in restaurants? I mean, because that's, you don't smoke in restaurants in Dawson County.
The state regulates that now. I mean, if a restaurant wants to have actual smoking, that they have to have certain type of filters and areas, and it's really expensive, so that's pretty much regulated by the state.
But can our regulations, I mean, can we regulate the vape stuff inside of restaurants? It's more restrictive of state law. I think that's where, when you get into confined spaces, is where people get offended about it. I mean, we balance the act of the right for the person to do it versus the right of the people that are around them not to take that in, so. And it's just a thought, if we were looking at confined spaces like restaurants, I wouldn't want it to be in restaurants.
And I will say that I think this ordinance is geared mostly towards regulation of the licensing part of it. And it does prohibit it on government property, but it doesn't go beyond that to talk about other types of restaurant uses or confined spaces or anything other than government property. So if we want to look into that, we certainly can. The one other topic, I guess, that I'd like to raise for your discussion and consideration that's different from the city of Dawsonville and different from any other ordinance that I know is that there's an interest in providing that the licensing, not the licensing, I'm sorry, the ability to sell to and use by would be at the age of 21 as opposed to 18. And, state allows it to be 21. And so, Chris, you astutely noted, it's more restrictive. And so, we would typically argue that if there's a state law and it doesn't specifically state that it's preempting local regulation, that provided it doesn't conflict, that we can enter into that field of regulation. Some may argue that there is a, implied preemption of state law because they say 21 and that's what they mean, and that's one of those objective things.
I think you mean 18, we're saying 21.
I said it backwards,
Yeah.
you're exactly right, I apologize.
Yeah, state's
So I
18.
just want you to be aware of that. So Dawsonville provides that, people can buy and use if they're 21. This ordinance says buy and use, no.
Or
18, why can't I get that right? 18, and we say you have to be 21. So we're having to say, we're saying you have to be 21 years old to buy or use vaping products. And so just want you to be aware of that. I know if this originated with some interest in having some, consistency and enforcement. And so that'll be something that's going to be different. And something that, could be an issue if someone wants to raise a preemption challenge.
There's one reason I wanted the 21 in there, just, if you got a kid that's still in school at 18, that's the biggest problem we got right now is in the middle schools and high schools and them mixing. You see it on the news every day where they carry a dozen kids to the hospital because they don't know what they smoked. I wanted the 21 to keep that 18-year-old senior from going and buy for everybody. That's just my opinion on it. Because they really don't know what this is going to cause in the future.
Yeah.
This is new. And the stuff they're mixing with it is even newer. And I'm glad the thing is where they can't mix on the premises because are they a licensed chemist? Are they knowing what amount they're putting in there?
Are you talking about the retailer can't mix on premises?
No.
Okay.
Because I watched a girl at the Braves game the other day sit there and brought a package out and it looked like she had a little, she was mixing all kinds of stuff up and smoking at the game. And so you don't know what they're putting in there.
Yeah.
Is there anything, with this vaping, like secondhand smoke, like cigarettes?
They don't know.
Don't know yet.
You don't know?
Too early.
None of that points.
I've had industry folks come to meetings and profess that there's no secondhand implications. But I think that, it's so new, I'm not sure anybody.
Well, Tim, were you affected by that person?
Yeah.
You were?
I noticed it's like a reaction just to smell it.
Really?
Of course, I can't go in candle shops either.
Well, that's just an excuse.
If we do put something like this, then obviously we'll need to update our signage throughout our properties. So that needs to be thought about somewhere along the Taubert's line.
Talbot.
What?
Signs.
New signs. You can have it, buddy. You got it. Other questions for council or for Josie?
Well, and as you think through any of these issues more, if you have any different direction, then please let us know. I've made some notes of some of your questions that we'll look into a little bit further and respond to you. But otherwise, if you have any epiphanies on, the age issue or whether you want to go into the, scared to say hookah, whatever it is.
As Chris, he knows.
Yeah, the additional alternative products, and let us know so we'll get that drafted in, so it'll be prepared to come back to you.
Do you think there'll be a challenge though about the age? I mean, can't people still go in the military at 18?
Yeah.
I just feel like that will come up.
I don't know, and, you know, that's something that if we, you know, don't have the ability to force a citation because someone rules that it's not, then, you know, that's, we withdraw the citation and we move forward, so.
There are other examples, I'm sure you'll do.
I'm not aware of any other local ordinance that sets it at 21. I think because people are just following the state, you know, on that.
As a state, I mean, they regulate cigarette stuff. Have they done anything legally from a regulation standpoint along these lines?
Of the state itself?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if they're regulating cigarettes and putting those regulations on cigarettes as far as restaurants and things
Right,
like that,
right.
is,
Oh.
have they changed their language to?
no, I think there are state regulations that address vaping. Honestly, I'm not sure how they address the restaurant side of it. I could look at that. But no, I believe that the state regulations indeed do say 21 for vaping. And so that's the issue, is whether that is a preemptive
18.
action.
We'll get you straight before this is over with.
Yes.
She likes that number.
I like 21, keep it
Yeah.
up.
Other questions?
So if I can ask one last question as a matter of process, we do need to have a public hearing.
Yes.
So would you like to see these questions answered and this revised and brought back to another work session? Or would you like to see it circulated and then tell us when you're ready to go to public hearing? Or what's the will of the board on next steps?
Bring it back one more time to the work session and then finalize that before we go to public
I
hearing.
think that would be
Most
good.
information we can have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll work towards that. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you, Jameson. Next up, we have presentation of board appointments, EMS Advisory Council, Danny Thompson replacing Lanier Swafford. Lanier has now been named as the new Region 2 EMS Council person for the state. Received that job, so he no longer can represent the county as a member of the council because he'll be working with everybody that's in the council. And so I'm proposing to you Danny Thompson to replace him. The term is August 2019 through December 2020. Danny's here. He can answer any questions about himself if you have any, and I'll try to answer any if you have any for me in reference to that board appointment. Next up, any questions on that one? Next up, we have the Georgia Mountain Regional Commission. Our county manager, David Headley, has been our alternate representative besides myself. That is a joint appointment between the city and the county. I did speak to the mayor in reference to this appointment. Now, the mayor and the council had made a different recommendation of Betsy McGriff, who is the, as you know, our economic development director. I have had conversation with our county manager, and you know, he said that, whatever y'all wanted to do was fine with him. And also spoke with David in reference to continuing to go to this meeting because in reference to us as a county, and he's the person who deals day to day with our staff, and the staff is primarily who uses the GMRC, whether that's planning, whether that's Dawn with the senior center on grants, or anything like that. So I still think that regardless of who that representative is, it's important that David continue to go and be advised of what's going on. And I did speak with Heather, who is the chair lady of the GMRC. There is no cost for him to go. He can continue. It's a public meeting. Anybody can go. All of you can go. The state does say that the chairman or his representative and the mayor or his representative are the county representatives. And as you well know, since I've sat in this chair, I have tried to go to as many of those meetings as possible. The leisure to go to now means we don't have a commission meeting on that last Thursday of the month. So getting there has not been a problem. So as I stated, the city is making a recommendation of Miss Betsy McGriff. I think you were going to, did you ever contact her to see if she was really interested? Because when I talked to the mayor the last time, he hadn't actually spoken to her. He had spoken to the chamber.
Yeah, and I called based on that without hearing firsthand. I did call Christy and Betsy, and they said either one of them would serve at the pleasure of whoever wanted us to. And I talked to Councilman French, I think, which is one of the ones that opposed, or I won't say opposed, but one of the ones that brought up the idea that it should be David, for the simple fact that the bylaws stated that it shouldn't be a paid employee. And so there was no hard, no reason for it not to be Dave for political power purposes, other than the fact that it's just, they didn't see it lined up with the bylaws
And to cover back on,
Against the rules.
GMRC bylaws.
well, and to go back to that too,
But they're paid, Betsy's technically, I guess she doesn't.
she's also paid by us.
She didn't get a
obviously.
check directly from Dawson County, but that department or that organization's funded by us. It's somewhat
So
quasi.
that she can't either then, really.
Well, no, going back to that as well, I talked to Heather, who's also the, like I said, the chair lady of the GMRC. They recognize how difficult it is to find someone who is just your everyday citizen who would travel month to month to month all over northeast Georgia. For a 1-hour meeting that takes you 2 hours to get to and 2 hours to get back home. A lot of times, like when we go to Stevens County, Raven County, Union County, Towns County, to find that person. So what you see if you look at the GMRC council members, you will see a lot of development directors, obviously who are paid by somebody. And you will see some ex-commissioners who I guess were so thrilled to just to keep going that they go. And they like the food. So they keep going. But when you go to these meetings, and like I say, I've been going, you don't see a whole lot of people who are just citizens. Because it's very, very difficult to find somebody to make that commitment. You know, Sharon, you go to meetings that are not here in Dawson County, and we do have a citizen that goes along to some of those, but that's hard to find. I mean, it's a little easier to get somebody to commit to come up here maybe to a meeting than it is to go to Towns County on their own dime. And these are unpaid meetings, so they kind of, even though that may be what the bylaws say, they're not stuck to that because they want a representative over not having anybody at all. And so finding somebody that'll say, yes, I'll volunteer and go.
So they don't mind,
They
because
don't
I know
mind.
that one of the guidelines is the private sector, so.
Right, and it's called a citizen representative, but they don't mind that based on the fact that it's so difficult to find. Now, if you can find us a citizen who wants to do that,
Well, I wondered about that,
Then-
Harold Turner, because he said he wanted to get involved and do things.
I don't know. I mean, so you can ask them, I guess,
I mean,
and see if they find someone, but, you know, as you well know, we have, and Kristen can tell you this, we have vacant positions right now that we've advertised. Nobody seems to want or fill. And so it is very difficult to get someone to commit to that kind of time, especially on an every month basis. I mean,
And I guess to your point, they are open, so anybody
Anybody
citizen
can go.
could go.
that's a public meeting.
For me, I don't mind if it's not Dave, and I think that if you're looking at a compromise, then the next logical person will be a Betsy or a Christie that represents both of us. But I still think that Dave should be involved, and I think on their side, personally, I think their city manager should be involved to bring back data and feedback.
And we had that discussion, the mayor and I did, about that very thing, that, you know, that he should bring along the city manager. He's the person over there that deals with the staff on a day-to-day basis. You know, I don't do that, he doesn't do that. And so I think it's important that the two people that do most of the business with the GMRC, or the staff, they should go along and stay abreast of, and David has said that, you know, that he works for us and he's willing to do whatever y'all want us to do. If you want him to go, he'll still go. And that way, if I don't go, he can be my representative. All right, so David's not here, so we don't have a county manager report, but we do have a birthday today. Sharon, I believe you have a birthday today, I've been told. And so that makes you 29 again.
Over and over, I'm stuck.
Stuck.
Stuck
Good
there.
place.
Now we,
Are you old enough to buy a vape?
Yeah.
No, I can't vape yet. No.
we normally sing, but it's become that we're not very good at that. So I think we're gonna have to, we've got to find somebody to start this thing off that actually can carry a tune in a bucket. And so that ain't me.
That was terrible.
It was
So who is the singer in the group? Yeah, who can sing? Start this
Just
off.
Talbert,
Talbert.
Talbert, can you sing?
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
Start
Front and center.
watch it.
Can y'all hear me from here?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Since Mr. Headley ain't here, I gotta come up to the microphone.
Go ahead.
Everybody ready on three? 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sharon.
Happy birthday to you.
That's good, man. It ain't nothing to write
This
home
is not a choir.
about. No,
This is
not a part.
But thank you.
All right, county attorney report.
Oh, well, I was packing up because I do not have a report, except I do have a few items for executive session I'd like to address.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for real estate litigation.
So move.
Motion by Commissioner Gaines, seconded by Commissioner Nick. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. Take a second here. And that's approved 4-0, and we will go into executive session in about 5 minutes. We'll meet back there. And then we will reconvene at 6 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.